So Rennala, she's the queen of Caria. She is the leader of the Raya Lucarians. So she is not only, a queen, but she's also like a chancellor. So she's, making decisions for, a wide swath of land in Liurnia, and has a lot of power. Um, so of course she's the queen of the full moon. So you have a crescent here. She actually surprisingly, for somebody who's very moon themed, her outfit doesn't have too much moon stuff. There's the shape right here. Hi, Saint Trina. Um, and then you have the crescent cut right here. But other than that, on her specifically, there's not like specific moon symbols. Um, but there are around her. So we have this symbol right here, which matches the top of this, which is the Celestial Dew item, which, forgives people, which gives you forgiveness. It was used during, obviously, Rennala and Radigan's marriage when he says sorry for trying to murder your people. Let's be friends, or more than that. Um, so you have this symbol, and she actually sits underneath it, so it's hard to see um, when she's kind of already in this state. But she's it's right underneath. If you see it, if you're either in the part of the game where Selen took over Raya Lucaria, or the cutscene that the egg is kind of like releasing all that black stuff, you'll see the symbol. It's also on top in a few places in the Grand Library as well. Um, he was very sorry, yes. Um, so, if you look closely at it, you can see that there's a lot of moon symbolism in this. So there's the circle moon right here, there's another moon, there's a bunch of crescents that are shaped out of it. So I like to think of it as a link between the Carians and the Nox, but also that fundamentally they both believe in the moon. And over here we have the Carian scholar. So this is a part of the Dectus medallion. The reason why I have it here is it gives context to kind of what was happening before she, got a little depressed and Radigan left her. Liurnia is a really huge part of the growth of Lendel for a time. And she's a huge part of Radigan's character and his growth. And so, obviously she originally was an astrologer. I have the quote here, of course, that she, granted, I know some people don't think this is Rennala, but, we're just gonna assume it is. You see her, she's in a very different outfit. She's not in her Carian, um, kind of like full robe yet. She's not, again, like this is a very academic robe. So this is, of course, she's kind of more in a, what would be similar to the astrologers. She doesn't have a hood though, which is very interesting. Um, Come on, other non-Rennala person with royal astrologer lineage. Literally. And met the full moon. And like in this game, like the moons are their own things. Like Ronnie's moon is different than Rennala's, then is different than the black moon. I'd actually go as far to argue that the crescent shaped moon we see in the outer world, in the overworld, is actually not the same exact moon as Rennala's. If you look at the image texture of the Rennala's moon, and then the moon in the sky, it does not look similar. Very oddly enough. And here, we have her scepter. It's cute. I just put it there because I like it. That's all. But, we get a lot about her through kind of also her, the situation around her. So she's in a library. She's kind of stuck there. We actually don't know if she's totally stuck there or if she was kept there. My mind is that she's kept safe there. I think the Raya Lucarians would have killed her at this point. And we fight a Carian knight to get to her. And then in second phase, Ronnie says, none shall disturb mother's rich slumber, however exactly she says it. So, it makes sense that she's kind of just there making her juvenile scholars. So then that's the hugest thing about Rennala, kind of in game, is that she's a boss, but she also becomes the way for you to, um, you know, change your stats. So she uses the egg Radigan gave her before he leaves, and uses it for not or I guess her not very well. What would be the word? Not very well received juvenile scholars, and they're a little frail too. But we'll get into that a little bit later. So I just wanted to start kind of off with what I kind of a little bit, very, very brief thing about her. But we're going to get into the astrologers and the robes of the Raya Lucarian scholars. Why are we doing that when we're talking about Rennala? Because it gives us a better understanding of why Rennala's outfit is the way it is. So one thing I'll say is Rennala's outfit does not have an exact one-to-one. There, so an example of an exact one-to-one would be different game, but Lady Dimitrescu in Resident Evil Village. So there's a specific photograph they took or that they used from a 1939 photo. And use that as inspiration for Dimitrescu. With Rennala, my argument's going to be that there's quite a few. And in part of that, we really want to explore kind of what's the deal going on with this kind of connection of clothing. So let's start with the astrologers. So astrologers were precursor to the Raya Lucarians. We can kind of suspect that they were in a few places. So we have the Stargazer ruins, we have the Moonfolk ruins, we have different kind of areas that are very centered around looking up at the stars. And we know that the astrologers traveled because they followed the stars. That's, a huge thing for them. Who did these sketches, BTW? These are ancient sketches. So like the one on the bottom is... Oh, no, they're just regular screenshots. I don't know what this filter is, to be honest. It does have a little bit of a flatness to it. But yeah, it's just screenshots and then an actual, like an old drawing. But any case, with the astrologers, they really kind of are the beginning for the Raya Lucarians. And something similar that we see in real life is at the start of academies in the 1300s and 1400s. So we have Cambridge, we have Oxford. This is from 1914, so not in 1300s, but we have academic schools being formed. What people don't tend to know is that colleges were really more for monks and religious people at the very beginning. People who were in colleges were usually being taught by priests or being taught by monks. So you see that in the dress of the astrologer. So right here on the bottom we have a Carthusian priest, I think, or friar. I don't think a priest, a monk, a friar, whatever they're called. And so you can see a very similarity in the cap. You can see this open arm going on. This is a kappa, I believe it's a kappa clausa, but it's open. So like this is kind of a more medieval style dress, but it's what people would have worn at the very, very beginning of something very similar, at least, in the colleges. So that's really interesting, right? That we have astrologers who, in their own way, are religious, right? They believe they're spiritual to the stars, or they believe in the stars. So you have this kind of connection between spirituality, religion, religious kind of like organized religion, and academics. And you see that even within their costume. So you see how this is actually a separate piece from this whole piece right here. Something that's very interesting too is that in order for you to have this hood piece, you actually have to put on the astrologer hood. So if you take off this little tiny bit right here, the hood will go back down. And that gives us also more insight into how influenced these pieces are from the astrologers. Um, so this little backing right here, this is called a liripipe. So the pointed edge of a hood. There's also some other ways that people kind of describe it. Oops, let me put it higher. There's, but liripipe is kind of the most common one. Um, so what's interesting about this is that this is very much a big part of the medieval era. Um, and as time will go on, you'll see this go down back to the hood because this is originally, just a regular hood. Originally, and then it goes back down and just kind of stays there. You'll see that in the academic gowns later. What else can we claim? You see this early stone. They already have like these kind of rosary-like glintstone necklaces, prayer beads, if you will. So let's go to the battle mages, who to me are very inspired by the Franciscan friars. So here, this is, I think, a really good example. So you have this not very evocative of this. Very, very common for friars to kind of have this little rope detail. And you have a mantle. So it's a little more open than this one, but it's the same thing. And the big difference for them, though, is this hood, right? The hood's very different. But I think it's very similar, and just in general, to that. But what's very different about this robe is that it has a long piece right here. And when you look at it, you kind of just think it's a regular sleeve, but then you realize later that it's actually this sleeve. It's just tattered because the battle mages travel and fight and do all this fun stuff. And it kind of makes sense for them, right? They're travelers. They actually have a similar degradation on their suit to Ronnie's original body, her dress. So that's something to just keep in mind. And right here you have a stole. A stole is another ecclesiastical vestment, so typically worn by priests in ceremonies. Some people call it something else. Some people just call it a scarf. Some people call it a tippet. Again, there's a lot of different scholars, and depending on what area you were raised in, what college you went to, people have different names. And so, scarf if you're not sure. So let's go over here to these guys. So this is the same exact robe as the blue and red Raya Lucarian version. I just got lazy and I didn't want to take more pictures, so you're just going to see this one. But the regular Raya Lucarian one has blue and red details. These match perfectly with Rennala's. They're the colors of kind of Raya Lucaria. The cuckoos also wear red and blue. There's actually many other characters, many other groups that wear red and blue. Originally, when I was kind of getting into lore stuff, I wanted to just make a thing about red and blue, but there was so many different ways in which red and blue was expressed in this game, it was just not going to happen. But you see here, you see a little crescent. So this actually comes on the sleeve of this guy, sorry. On this sleeve, you can see a little crescent. And that actually comes from schools. That comes from Cambridge and Oxford. Masters of Art tended to have this. And of course, throughout the centuries, it's changed. So, it depends on what area you're looking at. But you can see that same exact crescent cut. It makes a lot of sense if you were on the art team. You would look at academic robes first for this kind of like academy, right? And it was so brilliant for them to take something that really was a real world thing to have it kind of symbolize more about the moon, right? It's a crescent shape, so then we can infer moons and stuff about it. Even the color, right? So this color is very different from the blue and red. Why is it different? Just like in schools in Oxford and Cambridge during the years, different schools sometimes had different colors. And you see that less now. Usually the university has like one colored robe or maybe two, and then everybody wears those with different sashes that are stoles that kind of are different color. It just depends. Depends what area you're talking about. But it's to show that they're in a different school. And of course, the head does that as well, right? This is also a symbol kind of privilege, that you as a scholar are smart enough to own one of these heads to get bestowed it, almost like a cap. Caps are a little different though. In the past, they were just worn every day, versus now where they're worn ceremonially. They're not, you don't go to college and see everybody wearing little square hats. Um, but in any case, again, you have the similar friar little detail with the knotted ropes, this kind of almost like Franciscan monk style, but then it's meshed with the academics. They're really, really pointing at this era of history where religion and academia were really tied together, and specifically Christianity. And so here we have the juvenile scholars, Rennala's Sweetings, totally different sleeve, totally different cut, totally different arm kind of piece. And it's so funny because all of these pieces still harken back to various academic aspects. So we actually do see this cut sleeve. There's this kind of example. There's ones that go even further, but I just really liked how this really resembled a lot of the colors and themes of the Carians and the Raya Lucarians, like black robes. Yeah, exactly. So then this sleeve is really interesting because it has a slight resemblance to Rennala's. Rennala has also a puffy. Hers is more of a bagpipe sleeve. This is more of like a kind of like, I forget the name. It's similar to a leg of. It's not a leg of mutton. It's more of like a print. I forget what the sleeve is called, but it's a different one. But you have this little cut at the end, so it goes all the way to the wrist. Rennala's doesn't. She has a glove, and we'll talk about that more when we get there. So again, you see kind of this hood. So you see from where we went from this religious hood, liripipe medieval era, and this again in real life as well. And you have this with the astrologers, and then over time you have it be more academic, less kind of religious, ecclesiastical vestment, but still very much in that wheelhouse. So you still have the stoles, you still have kind of like a religious article of accessory with the necklace. So there's a lot of cool kind of juxtapositions between those two. Or similarities, I guess. Similarities would probably be better. So you can see here, this hood now is non-functional at this point. This is not a very functional hood either. So as time goes on, these hoods change shape. They change into a few different shapes, but at least these are some of the ones that Elden Ring wanted to kind of show off. Something that's kind of really interesting to note before we kind of get into Rennala more. Oh yeah. So then something to add really fast before I go to that point is that the Carthusian bishops would actually bestow Carthusian nuns in the ceremony with a stole and a manipple. It's like it sounds funny, but it's basically just like a toalla. Ooh, that's Spanish. In English, it's like a little towel, basically, a fancy towel. I just thought that was interesting, and especially because so much of academia is very male-centered, but in Elden Ring, Rennala is the one who obviously runs everything. But yeah, so back to my thing. I think one of the big things when you're researching about Cambridge, Oxford, the way that they're kind of influenced by religion in the beginning, and kind of them figuring out how they want to exist as an organization. There's a lot of strife. Actually, the way that Cambridge came into existence was that apparently there was students at Oxford who were hanged. There was a lord basically who did not like Oxford, this college, from what I can tell, and so then he basically had them murdered for a crime they probably didn't commit. So you have a lot of people moving to France. You have a lot of French people who are from Oxford moving to Cambridge, and Cambridge was already kind of a well-established not academic in college, but academic in like thought, was well known already because they had a lot of like ecclesiastical people. They had a bunch of like priests and monk scholars already there. So then Cambridge kind of then has like a second city. So there's also like to me a little bit of the Celia, Raya Lucaria thing going on where colleges kind of exist elsewhere as well. Not to say that Celia is necessarily like an academic institution, but you do see it influenced by Raya Lucaria. In a similar way, other colleges were influenced by scholars having to escape, having to move, leaving their academy. Um, but one of the really big things with them is that it's a lot about privilege. So a lot of the wear and the abilities that you had to dress was based on your financial security or your noble status. So noblemen were allowed, and very much in the way that Rennala is. Let's go back to Rennala real fast. Wearing something that's a lot fancier. Noblemen were allowed to wear fancier stuff. And we'll talk about that more when we get to her outfit. Actually, I think it's the next slide. Perfect, yeah. So here we go. We have this gorgeous drawing of Rennala that the artist did. So cool. I love this drawing. It does such a good job of kind of like giving her a little sense of grandeur before you see her, all depressed in her library. Um, so this is the bagpipe sleeve I was talking about. And you can look, here's the stole. Um, and for her, I would imagine she would technically have had a subtunica or like dress underneath, but obviously for Elden Ring being the game that it is with its accessories, they changed it to be a glove and then like a weird pant, and that was kind of underneath it. And I think that was done out of like gaming kind of equipment reasons. I don't think this would have been. I think the sleeve would have not been. I don't think it would have been a glove. I think it would have been a sleeve, if that makes sense. Again, you have her little crescent, gorgeous hat. But you can see here we have two images of the Chancellor robes that are, I believe, from Cambridge, might be from Oxford. But chancellors kind of wore these very, very fancy vestments. You can see a similar, long arm. You can see this kind of cut, but again, hers is more feminized, right? But it's actually, I think, to me, a mishmash. So you have this sleeve, you have the stoles of ecclesiastical vestments, and then you have a lot of the colors and gold embroidery, especially on her hat, as the chancellors. And then ultimately, she's most influenced by the kind of like cap and gown look. So hers would it be though, instead of, so like let's say this is like your master of arts, hers would be the closest to more of like a doctoral kind of dress, like, or even beyond a doctor, right? She'd be more of a chancellor. And so you see that, you see kind of the complicatedness of her outfit, the embroideries, the decorations. And you see that a lot in these kind of images. And there's another drawing I'll show later that I think influences kind of what they're inspired by. But I also wanted to add this image because I feel like she has a very similar stance in one of her images when she's standing with her scepter. Just her having a scepter alone. Yeah, so let's go. Let me see. Is there anything? Let me look really quickly at my notes and see if there's anything else I want to add to this. And kind of going back to and again, like Rennala being not only a queen, she's also a chancellor. She's like, she's a leader of a college, of an academy. We have a lot of these combinations of like religious, political, and academic kind of like leadership roles all rolled up into one. Because even the moon, I would argue, was a very kind of spiritual leadership that she's bringing. I think bewitchment even kind of infers that. But you even have like Professor E.C. Clarke, who I grabbed a lot of from his articles. He says in an archaeological journal, there is no doubt that the university dress of the Middle Ages is an adaptation of monastic costume. The original schools for mission universities were developed were of a clerical character, and their members wore clerical dress. And I think that really acts perfectly as a base for Rennala because of who she is and what she kind of shows. But yeah, let's go to specifics. So this is the mantle. This is the hood. So the hood, again, if we go back to earlier, the astrologers had a lyra pipe, the little pointed edge. So you can see that here. Here's the pointed edge lyra pipe aspect of the hood. It's made of 3 parts. So the hood itself, the lyra pipe, and then this lining. So if you go down here, we have these kind of like how-tos, like, oh, this is what your academic regalia is. You can see, she's a doctor, she's a professor. She's a little fancier. So it gives you it designates discipline, and then the blue would designate university. Just interesting. I think these colorings just kind of really influence Raya Lucarian and Caria in general, so you can't really tell what's what with that. But we also have some, so these examples are actually from the 1960s. So in the 1960s, there becomes more regulated academic dress. But you can see here, they're missing a little bit of that lyra pipe that's more definite with Rennala on this side. They're missing that a little bit. But it's still the same structure. But here you see, and this is from the 1600s, I believe. You see, and these are some proctors who would have been more, I believe, nobles, judging from how they look. You can see kind of this way longer, way more dramatic hood, which is really cool. And again, you can see kind of, you really get a sense of a lot of this style being really influential on Rennala. Something that's also really interesting, I forgot to mention earlier, is that her dress goes all the way down. Noblemen would have more likely had robes, and doctors would have more likely had robes that went all the way down to the ground. Later they would have been gone a little higher, just timeline-wise, but I just wanted to add that. Because hers is the only one that goes all the way down to the floor. The other robes in Raya Lucaria don't. So anything else I want to talk about? There's really not much other than just acknowledging that there is this time frame that is being shown through the dress, through the astrologers, the Raya Lucarians, and through the juvenile scholars. It really highlights how connected she is to the juvenile scholars. Let's go back up. So again, it's almost like this I don't know how to say what I'm trying to say. It's a simpler version of what the hood she has. And I love that. I love that detail. It really solidifies them as underlings to her. Yeah. Hold on. Bam. Okay. Is that the next one? Yeah. So let's talk about her hat real fast. Her hat, to be honest, I really looked for a one-to-one influence for it. I could not find it. We have here a Reddit. Hopefully you hear my dog. We have a Reddit document, a screenshot I took from Knight of Daggers, who put illustration Yoshitaka Amano, who amazing artist, suspecting this is the inspiration for Rennala. And I'm inclined to agree. This shape of a conical hat is not common. There are conical hats, they're called hennins, and you see them influencing the knocks. You see something kind of similar in Venetian style hats. They talk about it, doll hats, in this Reddit. Apologies to whoever claimed that. I don't remember who it was. But something I wanted to add to that, this is not definite. I'm not like, oh my god, this is definitely the influence. But this is a crozier. And a crozier is the top of a staff, basically. And maybe that's assigned to us to use the in-game interpretation. That's what I was just about to get to after this. But I'll get to that, St. Trina. I 100% believe that's exactly what they want. So this crozier is just funny because it's just weird. It's just like a random thing, but I was just like, wow, this really looks like Rennala's thing. It has this similar like aesthetic to it, but it's just like a religious thing. So I just thought it was interesting. So um, with that, I think it again, and Saint Trina just got to said it before I did on Twitch. Um, you really need to use the in-game interpretation for this hat to derive meaning. Whereas earlier we were deriving a lot more meaning from just the historical influences. Um, for one, it's a crescent. To me, if we're getting like lore talking, I think it connects to the Albinarics. I believe at one point she was supposed to, or the Carians were supposed to be like for sure the ones who made them. Obviously, they have crescent weapons a plenty, to use her favorite word. Um, it's just very interesting because she's not Rennala of the crescent moon. She's Rennala of the full moon. I always thought that was just very interesting to me because then, to me, crescents then become about death, rebirth. Crescent moons, obviously, when they're waxing or waning, they're ending or beginning moon cycles, basically. Um, so I think there's more to that. The fabric is very similar. I'm gonna get in really close here. This fabric is very similar to me to Ronnie's dress. So I do think now more than ever that Ronnie's dress would have been this color, this blackish, slightly gray, slightly blue color. Um, so, just a thing to think about. And we have all of these gorgeous designs, cool, cool, cool. They seem to be embroidered, so I thought originally it was metal. This is definitely supposed to be a fabric of some sort. But she has a bunch of gems. Now, of course, right, in this game, glintstones are rocks, they're crystals, they're gems, they're yada, yada, yada. But she has very many colored gems in her hat. One of the other things that definitely has quite a few different colored gems is the Mount Galmir staff. There's also some characters with multiple colors in there of their stones. For example, the Carian Knights don't just have blue glintstones, they have red as well. But she has a bunch of them. And one of the ones that I really want to highlight is this silver pearl. And I say pearl just because, it looks like those like cheap silver pearls you get at at like costume stores. That one's really interesting to me. I think again it connects to the silver tiers. I think it connects to the Nox. I think it might even connect to the Albinarics. She also has white ones that I'll show in a bit. We also have black. We have red. We have a green one, and then we also have a blue one. The blue is very perfectly hits the lazuli color that she has for that glintstone. There's a like the here. Let me go back. So you can see this. Unfortunately, brightened it, but this is usually a darker blue glintstone, and it matches really well with some of the glintstones that are in her hat. Why does she have a bunch of glintstones? One, because she's an all-powerful mage, and you want as many glintstones as you have to help your power. But two, to honor her children. I think they're references to her children. I think they're references to the deals that she's made along the way with Carians and other people. So if we remember, and we'll get into it a little bit later too, the oath with the giants and the trolls. I don't know if it's the trolls or the giants specifically that she has an oath with, but she does have trolls underneath her. So that's also part of the reference, I believe. But yeah, so with her hat, really, it just kind of comes down to like it being a symbol that needed to be kind of more moon-like for sure, because she was definitely lacking the moon kind of symbolism in her design. But it's also really kind of a way to show how long she's existed. She's been a queen for a long time if we think about it. Oh, Sworn Giant, yeah. But then they show a troll, which is very interesting. So I think she had to deal with the trolls, but they were giants at that time, maybe? Anyways, won't worry about that. I'll let another lore hunter get that. Um, but one of the other things I wanted to show too is this little design right here. You see this little bit of metal that's around the silver. It's a different color. And it's spiked. So it's one, two, three. Um, those match her ring. And Rennala actually doesn't have a ring on her hand. But we'll get into that. So let's talk about her sleeve. Her sleeve is going to take a minute. Look at her hand. There's a tan line. I love that so much. I love that she has a tan line. And a lot of people at the very beginning of the game noticed that Rennala has this ring on it, but people didn't quite recognize that this silver is the exact same on her hat and parts of her sleeve and the glintstone kris. The glintstone kris is symbolic of the marriage of the sun and the moon, Lindell and Akaria, Radigan and Rennala. And so it ties these two together time period wise, and solidifies this as a ceremonial tool that really embodies Rennala and Radigan's marriage. So that's something that's really big in Rennala's symbolism, in her fashion, in her dress is Radigan, in her marriage to Radigan. So her not having it, but the player character really is there to make you go look back and go, oh wow, she has a ring. She's a dried ring there, and it is different from, it's a different material from Ronnie's Dark Moon ring. Ronnie's is a different glintstone, and the perimeter of that ring is the same as the perimeter of silver kind of squiggly lines on top of Ronnie's hat. So, this is, again, silver glintstone, really supposed to also symbolize the moon. This is the moon. Silver represents the moon, for sure, in this game. It just solidifies that for sure. And I just love that this also has those little spiky edges. They really are. And part of the reason also why I stress this is because, you might think why all these textures, they don't really mean anything. They're whatever. It's like, no, they're actually, in this game specifically, really, really aware of when they're reusing textures, when they're reusing assets. I would even go as far as to say that's something to take a note of if you're looking at what glintstones affect what. If you think it's a silver tier glintstone or just straight up silver, they're going to have different looks. Silver tiers, like the silver husks, they have a silver color, but they have a Damascus pattern to it. These silvers don't. Silver Blue Moon Gang. So let's go look a little closer on her sleeve. So again, you can see white dots, and then you can see silver. So I think it's, to be honest, I assume it means like Albanarg and silver tier husks, but I couldn't say for sure. They are, though, these white pearls are the same as the pearls that are in here. So the hair that's in here, it was, we learned from, oh my god, I'm forgetting their YouTube name. Zuli. We learned from Zuli the Witch that, the hair that's in there is more of a circumstance of it being cut, of like the juvenile scholars being cut from the egg. But the little pearl balls, they were still there. They were intentionally put there for sure. So I do think there's they're inferring something about, and I don't know exactly what it is, but they're inferring something about Rennala using those beads in some form of way to either imbue herself in it, imbue something with the egg, or to change it. How that is, I don't know. But I just wanted to point it out. We also have this glintstone right here. It's like a pink lavender purplish color. Um, and while purple, like a darker purple, has a lot to do with gravity magic, this pinkish purple doesn't have any magic that we know of specifically. However, it does really match well with the pinks and purples, purpley pinks that. Oh, do I have it on here? Oh, I might not. Oh no, I don't. Oops. Okay. And, oh, you know what? I do. Okay, I'll go back down there in a second. It matches. Let me see. Is it up here? No. Uh, um, so it matches. Here we go. It's down here. So it matches the shattered color of the tapestry in. Oops, sorry, y'all. It matches the tapestry in the debate parlor. This color. It also matches the glintstones that are everywhere in Raya Lucaria. For some reason, they have pinkish purple glintstones, and why? Who knows? To be honest, because they don't have any magical equivalent. So most of the glintstones have colors that match magic spells in this game. This one doesn't. Though that pinkish purple really doesn't match anything. It matches a little bit of St. Trina's colors, but even then, I wouldn't. It's a shaky connection for sure to incorporate, but they are also very much around the orbs. What are they called? The orby dudes, the head orb dudes. There's a lot of pinkish purple crystals around them. It could be something with that. One of the other things that's on her sleeve is this long crescent, right? We this already we know. We saw this crescent earlier with her hat and with the other on the Oracle Envoys. For oh yeah, I'm not sure what that's in reference to. Um, um, yeah, so the crescent's there, and it's the same one that we've seen, but we also have this design 7, 8. What seem like stars. They have a very slight similarity to. Let me take y'all. Oh, I don't have the image. They're very similar to the stars on the Preceptor hat. Um, I'm curious if they're supposed to be suns around something. If you watch Quaylag, they have a lot of thoughts on this. What we kind of both agree on is for sure is that this has to do with the giants and the trolls, and the fire giant and the fell god. So he also has 8 circles around one kind of dot. That's a symbol that comes up quite often. We also have that on the Divine Towers. So one of the things that really solidifies this with so Quaylag had figured this out with just knowing about the 8 circles with the one in the middle. But one of the things I found that really solidifies the connection is that the trolls who have madness and are wearing these shawls have the same design on them. So you can see that right here. It's a little hard to see, but it's the same exact design as this one. It's just thread instead of like with these like little kind of like silvery beads or pieces on appliques, maybe would be the proper term. Um, and I kind of thought, oh yeah, these are the ones that we also see on the Carians. They actually have 10 orbs circling, and it's a different design. So why does only these trolls have it? Well, because it's a troll symbol, or it's a giant troll symbol. Um, and here we see this helix pattern, and it's like, oh yeah, that's the same helix pattern, right? Um, as this one. It actually isn't. This one has its own unique design that isn't anywhere else. It's not on. It's not exact as the one in on the trolls. So what is it? I think they're snakes. And I got some pushback, which is totally fine. If they're not, maybe they're not snakes, but they really look like snakes to me. You see this kind of like almost like rattlesnake kind of tail. you see these little circles that don't match the rest of the body, but are very in positions where eyeballs would be. They also really look very much like the heads of Elden Beast, the head of the Elden Beast. Um, so I again serpentine, maybe slug, maybe snail. But slugs and snails are actually really connected in this game because of the freaking slug snake things. Um, so, there also is snakes elsewhere. So we see it on Ronnie's brooch, and we see it on the preceptors. These are 100% snakes. So we actually have consistent symbols of snakes throughout history that represent a lot of, oftentimes, not only bad, but wisdom. We also have snakes. There's snakes, yeah, there's snake slugs in the manor. There's snake slugs where they're where the astrologers would have been at. They're actually right next to where you get the Great Hood that talks about Rennala's full moon. Um, so there's definitely, they're tying a lot to the Carian family. But there's snakes on the preceptor hat. And this one, you couldn't argue with me that they're snakes. They're 100% snakes. But why are there snakes? Well, historically, there are snake constellations. Snakes equal wisdom. In game, we have Mount Gelmir, so we know that there's already a precedent of ancient snakes in Elden Ring that they would have known about because, well, why else would Rykard have gone to Mount Gelmir? He would have known that from his family. And why would they have known that? Well, they have a freaking Carrion study hall, and on top of that, they also have a grand library. So they're worldly people. That's something that's really big about their Rennala symbolism, is that it really is meant to show how much knowledge the Raya Lucarians have, how much knowledge she has, and how much she rules over it. But yeah, they're little snakes, and it's cool. And also there's more snakes on the preceptor's hat on the mask part, or not on the mask, the little like tie part. So check it out. You're like, huh, snakes, cool. Yeah, so anything else I can say about these? Oh yeah, so again, we have the kind of the similar, this gives you a little bit better view of, see how this is an undertone, like this is a jacket thing, but I think for the game, for them to have gloves, they were just like, we're gonna make this a glove thing. And I love it. I would love to recreate this. I think it's so cute. Um, yeah, and again, it's so weird though. There's so many other symbols here that I don't have. These leaf symbols, this symbol right here, these squiggles, like I don't know what the heck they could mean, to be honest. But they do have, I bet you they have similarities to other things in game. And I think there might be some symbols that probably resemble some of the stuff on astrologers. But yeah, so that's the sleeve. Let's go to our last kind of thing on Rennala we want to talk about, which is her stole, her scarf. And because it's really, I could not get a good photo that felt interesting. I wanted to add her brooch and add the similarities it has to Roddy's. See, look at that. Those look like little snakes. Yeah, so there's the brooch. They just look similar. But the big thing on here is the crest. So typically when academic robes have stoles on them, they carry the university symbol on their stole. It's a very similar position. What's interesting about Rennala's is that I always just assumed when I first played the game that sigil was just the same one that you would use for the spells. So either the Carian one or the Raya Lucarian one, either one, I didn't really pay attention. But then I'd actually hold on, sorry y'all. So what led me to realize it was not that was Quaylag's video that I had watched about Liurnia a few months ago. I mean, that's actually what led me down this whole rabbit hole of Rennala for sure. But it's different. It's not the Raya Lucarian symbol. So you see these kind of flame symbols on the bottom. Generally, squiggle lines like this in heraldry would be, like suns and stuff. You have this, like thing that covers these two images. So it's like almost like metal looking. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 circles with, I believe, Chinese characters. And again, this picture is not going to be the best to look at this, but that's what we have. And it really models after some kind of like different like spiritual beliefs. So like one of them that kind of looks similar to it was like the Sephirot, Sefirot, I believe. And there's some other stuff too that I won't get into. It's not really my area of expertise, but just know that there's some like, to me, this is really kind of starting to really show what they're trying to talk about, and we'll get there in a second. Yeah, the Sephirot thing, it's this symbol right here. It's very similar, at least. It's not exact. Yeah, definitely look at the sigil again, if you haven't, if you want to look at that kind of stuff. So we have the fire, and then we have, and it's hard to see in this photo, I apologize, this green land, or at least what looks like land, and a blue sky with this silver fluid or smoke coming up and then going into what I would assume are clouds. So one of the things Quaylegs actually said recently, because they were talking about it not too long ago, was as above, so below. So, you know, go give them a follow, or go ask them for sure if you want like a good explanation. But what I can say, at least from what I've researched, is that it's basically like what happens in the stars or heavens happens down here in a different realm, or whatever happens in outer realms happens in inner realms. What happens, and if you're Christian, you know, you kind of say like it as a wish almost. It's like, ooh, as above, so below. It's like, oh, okay, the riches of heaven now as they would be down here. But there's a lot of kind of interesting stuff that could symbolize here, because what is Raya Lucaria under but the Lake of Rot? And what is Liurnia consist of but green forests with rain and water? So to me, they mirror one another. It's like two people doing the same form staring at each other, but like in metaphysics. Yeah. So to me, this is Rennala, the queen, the Lucarian, having full mastery of the world around her. That's what it symbolizes to me. I think it's a symbol of power. I think it's a environmental reference. There's some other things it could be. So it could be the primeval current, possibly. It could be maybe something to do with the silver tears. So there's different stuff, but you know, that's what I'm gonna go with. But you know, really, we're getting into the weeds of things when we're talking about this sigil. This is for the, this is for the diehard fans to argue over and not necessarily have a solid evidence to me. And I love that. I think it's really great that they added this symbol because it's so random. It's like, why is this there? But it does have this, again, these fire things kind of have a lot of similarity to a part of the Raya Lucarian sigil. Or is it that, I believe it, yeah, it's the Raya Lucarian sigil with a sun that has, or star that has the squiggle lines coming out of it. So similar kind of aesthetic to that. And yeah, oh my goodness, I think we're pretty much at the end here. So, what can we derive from Rennala and her fashion? And there's a few stuff. From a historical perspective, we can gather that the team was really inspired by the growth of academic universities in Europe from the 1300s, 1100s to, I think the 1300s, to the 19th century. We get a sense of, just like in real life, we get a sense of privilege and hierarchy within academic universities, within Raya Lucaria. And that's based on not only what you can do, but also who you are and your status. So again, Rennala having the nicest outfit really solidifies her as the head honcho. Even though she may not be quite the head honcho anymore. From a lore perspective, we can really gather that Rennala and the Raya it is a symbol of the history of the lands between. She's a living record of it for a lot of it. Astrologers are ancient by nature of who they are. So Rennala has existed for a really, really, really long time. She's existed through multiple ages of the lands between. So we know that she has a long history. So then we get to see that in action, or not in action, excuse me. We get to see that in symbolically. We get to see that with the giants, the oath to the giants. We get to see that with her marriage to Radigan. We get to see that with the snakes that could be a symbol of something in the past. We see that with the way that they mix academic and holy vestments to form who she is as a character. And it's really quite brilliantly made. We can get into the thick of it too. It's like, well, it connects her to the Nox. It connects her to, possibly being a part of making the Albinaurics, or definitely being a part of, making not making the silver tears, but using the silver tears, obviously, because she uses them for the eggs. So it really shows, again, she has a really strong connection to the Nox. Herself. And I think that's really fascinating. One of the things, oh yeah, I forgot to mention this great hood more. Anyways, we won't worry about that. But yeah, so if you're watching on YouTube, this is the end of the video. Thank y'all for watching. And we'll be back with more lore. Ben has some stuff they want to talk about. I definitely am going to be doing this with a character that is far less complicated. Hopefully, we'll see if I regret saying that. But we're going to be exploring next Dolores the Sleeping Arrows outfit. So then we'll be talking about the page outfit and the high page outfit as a result, since that's what they wear. We'll also talk about the hat that they're wearing, which is the noble's hat. So that'll be really fun. And yeah. And then this would be the end of the video.